It's it. Brandon Schaub. He gave his opinion on Dana. They ate live like piranhas.
It's so dumb. I didn't talk to him about that, but first of all, he's wrong.
Yeah, he's
wrong about the theory. Look, Brendan's my boy, but he needs a handler. Yeah. He needs someone like me around him all the time. What are you gonna do? No. Yeah. Here's why. Yeah. And he'll go, yeah, you're right.
And then the other thing I think that irks me even more is Dana lies about it. And then people want to get mad at me. Oh, dude, come on. You think Dana would actually do that UFC 279? Brendan needs a handler. Do I? Or does your boy need a handler? You should have ran that by me. Right? I don't need a handler. These guys need a handler.
Wow. So it finally happened. A few weeks ago, I made a video with a prediction, saying how I thought Brendan Schaub was definitely going to respond to Joe Rogan, saying that he needed a handler and essentially roasting him on his podcast. It will be interesting to see how Brendan Schaub responds. I do think he will respond. I think that he will get very emotional by Rogan's response, by his insults, and I think he will do something dumb. And well, it finally happened. So a little bit of context here. About 2 weeks ago, UFC 279 went down, and some strange things did happen. But Brendan Schaub was one of the many people who questioned the event, thought that Dana White was lying about certain things, and thought that there was a conspiracy behind the event. Obviously, Dana White heard of that, and he responded to Brendan Schaub. Brendan Schaub said, "Hold my whiskey," and decided to respond to Dana White with a long Instagram post that actually went viral for him and got him some attention for that week. Now, back then when that happened, I thought it was pretty funny, and I thought, you know what, good for Schaub. Between Brendan Schaub and Dana White, I don't know who is more hated among fighters and some comedians. And you can argue whether the conspiracy was dumb or maybe had some points behind it, but it got him some attention. When I first listened to the podcast, I was shocked. Why would Joe Rogan be so invested and so upset at Brendan Schaub saying that about the UFC? And he was so mad that there was a clear cut, meaning that there was an edit done. He said too much and they just had to remove part of that podcast or part of the conversation, which is wild. Because here's the thing, Brendan Schaub has done way worse things than say that about the UFC. Like, I don't know, maybe threaten Bobby Lee and use Joe Rogan's name to try and intimidate him. That clearly didn't upset Rogan at all. But when Brendan Schaub questions the UFC, that's when he draws the line. It's a bit weird. How dare he question the ethics and honesty of the UFC, right? So naturally, Brendan Schaub responded with this on his last episode of the Schaub Show.
I'm like, well, he can do it, but yeah, some just rich billionaire, not even a millionaire, liking something and like,
yeah, and just like,
and then these people
rent it out, and then Dan be like, yeah, do it.
And the people
and then
are fighting.
The two rich guys like, yes, yes. And in what world is this? What world are we living in? And then the other thing I think that irks me even more is Dana lies about it. And then people want to get mad at me. Oh, dude, come on. You think Dana would actually do that UFC 279? Brendan needs a handler. Do I? Or does your boy need a handler? I'm not the one playing grab ass with Mark Zuckerberg, letting him rent out Thick Boy Studios, shutting it down for his entertainment. You should have ran that by me. Right? I don't need a handler. These guys need a handler. Somebody should have gotten the ear of Dana and Mark Zuckerberg and went, hey, you two rich, privileged.
All right, so a couple of things that we need to unpack here. Now, the first one, I do have to say this. This one's pure speculation, okay? So take this with a grain of salt. This is pure speculation. I have no proof or anything that supports my claim whatsoever. With that being said, when Brendan Schaub was responding and saying, oh, I should have ran that by you, or he said something along those lines, he winked into the camera when he said a certain phrase. Now, this is me looking way too much into it, but could that possibly be Brendan Schaub sending Joe Rogan a message? Like saying, hey, I know, right? I know what went down back in the day, because if you guys remember, a while back, Brendan Schaub got in trouble by Rogan because on an episode of The Fighter, on an episode of Below the Belt, back when he had it. He mentioned that he knew a couple of bald guys that were, sleeping around or whatever, alluding to Joe Rogan and Dana White having side pieces, allegedly. Now, after that happened, the next episode, Brendan Schaub clearly apologized and took back everything he said. He said he was kidding around. He didn't mean that it was Joe Rogan, yada, yada. It was very clear that that somebody had a conversation with him and said, hey, you need to retract this and be careful with what you say.
I'm going to segue into this. I'll tell you what's not a great idea is to quote anything I say off a number of the 3 shows that I do. Between last week's podcast on King the Sting with Theo Von, a gentleman who was losing his hair sent in relationship advice, says, I'm losing my hair, man. I'm worried about shaving my head. I'm worried I'm not going to get chicks anymore. My dumbass, I say a lot of dumb things, and I take credit for it, and I own it, man. But when I have a problem with it is when it affects very close friends like Joe Rogan, who has to deal with some sort of media frenzy now because they misquoted me. When I say misquoted me, I assume everyone knows the context that I'm talking about. What I meant by that, and this is me correct it now, so there's no miscommunication, there's no blurred lines. I did not mean Joe Rogan is cheating on his wife. Joe Rogan is one of my closest, dearest friends. I wish everyone had a friend like Joe Rogan.
However, this next point does have some ground to stand on, and it's basically Brendan Schaub going after or clapping back at Rogan and not holding back because he's salty or mad that he was left out of Sober October of that challenge. Now, I couldn't find the post. I looked everywhere for a couple of hours and I could not find it. But I remember seeing an Instagram post from Brendan Schaub saying that he was actually doing the Sober October challenge and that it was going to be fun and no alcohol, yada, yada. And then it's no longer there. And I haven't heard him talk about it. And I think he is still drinking. So it kind of made me think, you know what, maybe he thought that he was going to get in because, there are theories that say that he has been drinking a lot, building himself as this alcoholic so that he could get into the challenge and crush it. Realistically speaking, at the end of the day, it would be only Joe Rogan and him, fighting for first place. And if you guys are enjoying the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps out a ton. It really does. And I appreciate that. Thank you. But going back to the previous point, I'm not saying that Joe Rogan is wrong in this situation. Clearly, Brendan Schaub needs a handler. All I'm saying is I think Brendan Schaub should respond to everybody that talks about him. If people like myself and many others can monetize talking about Brendan Schaub, then obviously he should as well. He should respond to anybody that talks about him. Obviously, going after Joe Rogan would probably be career suicide. But if you think about it, that is how Joe Rogan got his start, or that's how he started popping off back in the day. If you guys remember, Carlos Mencia, who was insanely huge and famous, one day decided to talk bad about Joe Rogan at this radio station in Tucson, not thinking that anybody would hear it. That radio DJ sent that tape to Joe Rogan. He heard it and then went on a nationwide tour just trashing Carlos Mencia, calling him a thief, and just completely trashing him. That's how he got a lot of traction, and he essentially became like everybody's hero for taking down Carlos Mencia.
A fake ethnicity, and he's a joke thief. There's nothing genuine about him, and yet this thinks he's going to get on the air in Tucson, and I'm not going to hear about it. But thank God this guy Frank emails me and sends me this. Kudos to that guy.
So it would be an interesting route, and at the end of the day, if Joe Rogan takes a shot at you, it's your right to respond, I would think. Also, I had mentioned this in my previous videos, and I guess it really upset a lot of his fans, a lot of Joe Rogan fans. I essentially said that Joe Rogan is still an employee of the UFC, and he still has to toe the company line. A lot of people said how Joe Rogan is a multi-millionaire. He's so rich and he doesn't need to do anything and is doing Dana White a favor. Sure. You can say that about any billionaire. They don't need to do anything, but that's not how business works. The reason why they have a value in the marketplace is because they are reliable and they can toe a company line. Dana White can't just walk away from the UFC. He has to work there. He has to hold up his end of the deal. People like Elon Musk can't just quit the company and, go live a normal life. They have a board of shareholders who they have to, who they have to respond to, and they have a duty to make them money. But I'm just saying, I think he just overreacted a little bit too much when defending Daddy Dana White. That's all I'm saying. So now, well, what do you guys think? Did he take an L with that? Did Brendan Schaub take an L with that response? Did he have a good point? In my opinion, like I said before, I think it's good work. Coming from him, I think it's funny, especially going after the three giants, Mark, Joe, and Dana. So props for that. I do think he needs to keep that up, respond to everybody, not just them, but low-level comics that take shots at him. I think he should respond as well. Be funny about it. Don't be, aggressive. But I think that's all we have for today. See ya.